of Commerce of our college as a result of overwhelming response of the participants from all over India for our seminar held on 29th May 2020. This webinar would not have organized without the support of our college management and Principal Dr. D.M. Mukundanayak and Vice Principal Dr. all the spheres for organizing this seminar. Now I request our Principal.
Postgraduate Department of Commerce, TV Maruti, APS Educational Trust, Sri AP Acharya. I welcome Honorable and also I welcome Honorable Joint Secretary Sri A. Muralidhar and Sri welcome Honorable Mentor and Trustee Sri Mohan Dev Alva. I welcome Honorable Governing Body Chairman of ICMAI for more than 2 decades, and even today he is actively associated with Institute. And I also welcome all the participants for today's webinar and also welcome our Vice Principal, staff and non-teaching staff, our college for their wholehearted support. Thank you.
I am Dr. Shivanna, DC, Vice Principal of Acharya Pathshala College of Commerce. I am happy that our Acharya Pathshala College of Commerce has organized a national level webinar GST. I congratulate all of organizing this webinar. Good luck. Thank you.
The head of the Commerce Department, Dr. B.S. Sudha. Today, how it is going to benefit various sectors in the country. I will touch on the background of GST, why it is required, how it is brought to our country, and who has, and all those things behind the introduction of the GST in the country. The name came into existence in the year 1950, depended on the value-added tax. Because I am talking about this, the topic is the economy impact of the France, a small country in European. One of the advantage for the European country is a single government able to establish a national market in 1954. About 195 countries. Imagine what is the importance of the GST by this type of statistical in our country because of the existence of the WTO. As you are all aware, for the whole world, and we are required to abide by the guidelines issued by WTO. Then later on, we have started thinking about GST. First time in the year 2000 by the great Prime Minister Vajpayee. Later on, you imagine in our country, to introduce GST, the country has taken 17 years to introduce the GST in our country because of various problems. But there is no alternative to introduce GST in the country because of the economic growth, development, etc. As you are well aware, there are 2 types of taxes, direct tax and indirect taxes. That is GST, will have an impact on the national economy in any country. So without talking about the indirect taxes and its, whenever we talk about the GST, we should always talk about the impact on the national economy. I am just going to the indirect taxes, and we have all understood the economics started from in the 17th century. Adam Smith has evaluated some of the canons of taxation. Later on, Charles Francis Bastable in Ireland also has developed some of the other developed canons of taxation. One important of the canons of taxation is the equity and equality, improvement of productivity, and the tax base, the increase of the tax base in respect of the taxation. Even if we talk about our own culture, Indian taxation principle has given an economic guidelines to the government there, how the tax will be collected. Tax should be collected like a bee collecting honey from the flowers without hurting the flowers. So this is just paying the tax to the government. Without paying the tax, the government cannot function also. Later on, this concept has been developed. Later on, other countries have followed it. In the year 1991, some of the Eastern countries, namely Singapore, Malaysia, etc., they have started and implemented GST. First time GST has been introduced in Australia in the year 2000 with a single rate of tax in the whole country at 10%. They have a lot of advantage so far as the GST is concerned in that country. Later, other countries, namely Canada and Brazil. I am insisting that Canada and Brazil is the one of the important two countries have taken the advantage of GST, which has an impact on the national economy. So after that, India in 2000, we have started thinking of GST in our country. So this is the history. You can see how the countries have developed because of the taxation system, simple taxation system, that two indirect taxes. Because indirect taxes ultimately to be paid by the people only. So here, I want to tell you, in 2000, after starting that, there was a need for amending the constitution. Then committee has been formed in the year 2005. A value-added tax concept has been introduced in the whole country. Again, it is brought from Brazil and Canada. After that, Brazil and Canada has started implementing GST also. Even today, I'll tell you, a country like United States of America, there is no GST at all. Even now, they are following the old system of taxation, multiple taxes, because of the government sector system in United States of America, provincial governments. So, in our country also, we had the same problem, but ultimately, we are able to overcome this difficulty of the federal structure for introduction of the national level taxation in the country. The slogan of GST is that one nation, one tax. What is the advantage so far as the economy is concerned? One nation, one tax will have a lot of advantages, benefits from the three sectors. One from the point of government, another one from the point of the businessman, and the third one, very important, impact on the consumer. GST basically is a consumption tax. It is the destination tax. The last point, tax will be paid. If I talk about the economy, I will talk about the GST in the supply chain. When we talk about the supply chain, starting from the manufacturer to the retailer is a supply chain. That all taxes flows from manufacturers to the consumer through a supply chain. One of the important feature of the GST is that in a supply chain, the tax impact is very minimal because we have a concept of value-added tax that business people in the supply chain will pay only tax on the value addition made by the persons involved in supply chain, because supply chain are the middlemen who collects tax from the public and transfer it to the government. So as a result of that, supply chain is a very important in GST. How they are going to function, how they are going to contribute because of the liability, etc. All those things are very important from the point of GST. The concept of GST, as I already told you, consumption-based destination tax. As a result of that, B2B, there are two types of transactions in GST. One is a B2B, business to business, and the other one is a B2C, business to consumer. In case of a B2B transactions, the tax liability will be minimal. There will be only tax on value addition. GST is concentrated on two aspects. One is the consumption-based destination tax. The other one is the value-added tax. Value-added tax concept has been brought into our country in the year 1985. There afterwards in the states also we have brought into the value added tax in the year 2005. All the concept has taken the advantage so that the tax reduction can be made by way of increasing the tax base. When I'm talking about the tax base in GST, that means the people who are paying the tax, who are responsible for collecting the tax from the public, increases. The persons in a B2B supply chain, lot of people have come into the tax net because of the increased tax base and the reduction in the tax rates. If I go back to the history pre-GST regime, I will tell you, in our country, we had about 20 types of indirect taxes in the country. What is the impact of these 20 taxes in the country? For the past 70 years in our country, we have followed this system of taxation both at the central level and at the state level. 70 years we have passed that without taking the advantage of the value added tax from European countries and other countries. At least, at last I will say, we have decided to introduce GST with all the hurdles overcome by the government. So ultimately, the date of birth of GST in our country is the 1st July 2017. Now it is only 3 years only for the GST in our country. So people are talking a lot of economists and all those things. What is the use? Why? Where is the economy development and all those things? For 3 years, you can't do any magic. European countries exist with a value added tax from the past 50 years, I will tell you. Now, almost all countries, because of the recession, economic, for example, Japan also, Japan has reduced the tax rate to 3%. But what happened in Japan? There was a recession and the country has suffered a lot of disadvantage so far as the economy is concerned. So under these circumstances, we have to see what is the benefit GST. It is not going to happen immediately. There is the short term, long term. These are all the long term benefits we have to see from the point of the country, from the point of the economic development growth. Keeping in view the Adam Smith in 17th century, later on in the 18th century, Charles Francis Bastable. These are all, they have developed the canons of taxation. Even today, we have to follow that so far as the canons of taxation. GST is based on the progressive taxation system. I will tell you progressive taxation system because based on the canons of taxation is that a tax base should be increased. That means lesser tax will be paid by the more number of people is a progressive taxation which contributes huge revenue to the government. So this has been done in our country with the purpose of implementing GST in the country in the year 2017. After introduction of the 2017, we have a lot of problems also. It is not so easy to monitor the GST system in the country because of the various administrative problems, federal government structure, 28 states and 8 union territories. We have to satisfy the state governments. So all this will have an impact on the national economy. So it is not possible to see the benefits in the short term. For a country like India, after 70 years, if you want to see the economic development of the GST, it will take some more time also to stabilize the system in the country. So as a result of that, GST has been introduced. There are advantages. After implementing the GST in our country, there are advantages are going to be derived in future also because of the GST. Unless we have to follow this, we cannot see any development. We cannot cope up with the old system of taxes like America. For example, one of the important concepts of the bringing the GST is the cascading effect. Removal of the cascading effect of taxation is one of the important objective of bringing the GST into the country. What is a cascading effect? In the earlier period, I already told you about 20 types of taxes. 8 taxes of the central government, another 9 taxes by the state government has contributed to the cascading effect of taxation. Ultimately, indirect taxes is levied on goods and ultimately it is included in the prices of the commodities. As a result of that, multiple taxes, cascading effect, all those things has resulted in increased prices, the economy is going to affect. I'll just talk about the impact of these prices on the national economy. I'll talk about economics. Whenever there is an increase in prices, the people, the purchasing power will come down. As a result of that, the demand also will come down. When the demand comes down in a B2B sector supply chain, people start supplying. As a result of that, productivity will be reduced. So ultimately, we measure the national economy by way of a GDP. GDP have estimated 7.7 in the year 2017. Because of the various recession and all those problems, the GDP is coming down also, because not because of GST, I will tell you. So it is because of various other reasons the GDP rate has come down. In the FY 2019, the GDP came down to 4.5 in the last quarter of 2019, as accepted 5%. In fact, the World Bank has estimated the GDP rate of India to the 1.9%, but we have surpassed that GDP rate because of the development in GST. I will just tell you, in the year 2017, if the country has not introduced the GST in our country, this GDP and all those things would have drastically reduced in the country. More number of economists thought that the two things that has affected the national economy is, one is GST, other one is the demonetization. I will not talk about the demonetization. It has its own advantages and disadvantages. I will stick to my discussion on GST. Now, GST has been introduced in the country at the national level, one nation, one tax. Unlike in other countries, there is a single rate of tax. Australia 10%, and in some other countries 15%, Singapore, Malaysia, Canada, and Brazil. We have followed the concept of GST bought from Canada and Brazil, which suits our country, because Canada and Brazil is also a federal structure of government. So India has borrowed this concept of destination-based consumption tax from Canada and Brazil, implemented in India, suitably changing the laws. Presently, we have, because of the federal structure, we have different laws, GST laws. Ultimately, in 2014, the Constitution amendment has been made by the government with both in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, which facilitates the introduction of GST from 1st April 2017. Of course, there are initial hitch-ups also in the implementation of GST. It has to be overcome by the years to come and all those things. So, I will go to the concept of GST. I have already told you there are two transactions, B2B and B2C. There will be minimum taxation on the respect of the B2B supply chain. So, in a supply chain, unless there is a value addition, there is no tax. So, all business people will try to have some value addition so that the profitability of the supply chain people will increase. As a result of that, there will be a tax revenue to the government. Ultimately, indirect taxes, everything is to be paid by the consumer only. Very important is that in order to reduce the cascading effect, multi-point taxation, multi-stage taxation, multiple taxes, all these has affected the prices of the commodities. It has been overcome by the introduction of the GST to remove all these hurdles in the implementation and the GST. Taxation revenue, for example, once we are talking about the indirect taxes revenue to the government, around 10 lakh crores in the country. Now, it has been increased also revenue because of various other reasons. The tax revenue has come down. In the last, I think in the month of February, March, around 90,000 crores of GST has been collected in spite of the recession in the international economy. So this is the advantage. If at all, if we assume that if GST is not there, our economy is still worst, as estimated by the World Bank, our GDP should have gone down to 2%. So this is one of the advantage on the national economy so far as the GST is concerned. Now, I will go into little bit details on the GST, how it is going to work, how it will have an impact on the economy, how it will have an impact on the supply chain who are involved in the business people, what is the advantages for all these people. So one of the important is that, as you know, that removing the cascading effect of the taxation, as a result of that, there will be one tax. We are able to establish a national market in the country for the product prices is concerned. If you buy a product in anywhere in the country, across 28 states and 8 union territories, so you will pay same price. It was not there in the earlier. We used to pay 100 rupees for a product in Karnataka. We used to pay sometimes the lesser price in other states, neighboring states, so 60, 70 rupees. Because this problem was because of the earlier taxation system. This has been overcome by the introduction of GST in our country. In a supply chain, how this cascading effect is going to result is that the one of the concept of the GST is the input tax credit mechanism. Input tax credit mechanism, I told you, whenever there are two types of activity in a trading, simple trading, buying and selling of goods. If a tax has already been paid on buying, that is on purchases, that tax is going to be used for the payment of output tax. This is known as the input tax credit. You are already aware of that. So there are a lot of provisions made for availing the benefit of input tax credit mechanism in GST, especially in a B2B sector. B2C, we can't avoid. There are a lot of small scale industries, small business people are there. Recently, there is a provision for increasing the base of the small taxpayers also. That I think I'll tell you about after some time later. What is the advantage for the MSME sector so that it will contribute to the national economy. In case of input tax credit, when the tax paid on purchases already, use that for the purpose of output. In respect of the manufacturing, there will be a lot of value addition. In respect of the B2B, trading people, starting apart from manufacturer, the concept from distributor, wholesalers, retailers, these are all supply chain people. Only when they make profit, they will pay tax. So, there the intention or the psychology is that they have to increase the value addition and reduce the value addition so that the selling prices will become competitive. Increasing a value addition, it will affect the taxation revenue. So nobody wants to increase the value addition. They will cut down the cost for the manufacturing activities. This is a cost reduction in the supply chain. As a result of that, the tax reduction should be happen because of the reduction in the value addition. So in all industries, in the supply chain, people try to reduce the value added concern, that is the expenses incurred for converting the raw material into a finished product. If they are efficiently managed and all those things, there will be reduction in the value addition. As a result of that, tax also will be paid by the supply chain at a lesser rate. Another advantage, when there is a value addition, increases and all those things, prices also, I already told you, it has to be fixed suitably. So at that time, the prices will go up. So this will affect the economy. The chain is that reduction in prices, it results in increase in demand by the consumers. Increase in demand will result in increased supply in the B2B sector, that is supply chain. Increased supply has to be met by increased productivity. When increased productivity happen, not only in the GST payment, whenever there is an increased productivity, business people will start earning more profit. So this is an advantage to the business people in a B2B sector. Later on, when come to the advantage of the government and consumer is one advantage is that reduction in the prices of the commodities. There is a established also 3 years we can't see anything and all those things, but there is going to be a standardization of various product selling prices and all those things. Not only that, not only reduction in the prices of the consumable items in the hands of the consumer, as a result of that, when people start paying lesser tax for various necessities and needs, the money left out with the consumers will increase and they will have surplus money, which can be used for other necessities. As a result of what will happen, it also increases the demand for various other sectors. In a country like ours, we have a different class of people. Higher level people, middle level people, luxury people, so many people will be there. So people, if they have more and more surplus money, they'll be able to utilize for and all those things. With this view, Even though we talk about the one nation, one tax is not possible in our country because of the class of people in our country. So as a result of that, no doubt we have brought Canada and Brazil model of GST. It is known as a value added tax because of the structure in our country, federal structure. So we have to keep a different rate of tax initially. I hope this now presently we have a 5% GST, 12%, and then 18%, 28%. Luxury items are charged at 28%. Then, for example, lot of automobiles. The automobile is a luxury in our country. So, as a result of that, there will be more tax on all those things. There are other things where electronics items has been brought down to 5% because of the digital India. These are all the impact on the economy if I am talking about that. One small examples how a value-added tax works with a concept of consumption-based destination tax, that is the input tax credit mechanism. Let us assume that the manufacturer purchases goods at 100 rupees. Then after buying the material for 100 rupees, you will pay tax rate at 10 rupees. In an input tax mechanism, what will happen? Earlier system, the tax was used to add to the cost of material. As a result of that, cost of inputs used to increase. Now what will happen in input tax credit mechanism in GST? The tax paid by the manufacturer and the raw material will be kept separately in an input tax credit account. So cost of material remains only basic cost 100 rupees only. He will make a value addition. Let us assume that he will make a value addition in respect of the labor cost, conversion cost to, then profitably everything adds 50 rupees. So it comes to 150 rupees. So when you fix 150 rupees for a product, he will charge GST only on 150 rupees. Let us assume that the 10% tax is going to be levied on 150 rupees. The tax will be only 15 rupees. Now what will happen? I have already told you in the supply chain, B2B, there is no tax element. Only tax impact only on the value addition. What is the value addition made by the manufacturer in this case is only 50 rupees. So he will pay tax on 50 rupees. 10% of 50 rupees is only 5 rupees. How it happens? Already on the material he has paid 100 rupees. He collects 15 rupees from consumer or a customer or a buyer. He will adjust the 10 rupees which has already paid on the purchases. Net 5 rupees only will be cash outflow in this case. This is only a small example how the input tax credit mechanism affects. Like that, in a supply chain, this type of adjustment goes on up to 3 to 4 stages in a supply chain. You can imagine when all these things are going to have an impact on the selling prices. If a people go on adding value addition, etc., and all those things, the impact of that will be very, very minimal. So this is one of the advantage. This is how you are going to remove the cascading effect. If that all cascading effect exists, that he will charge 110 plus 60, it becomes 160 selling price. He will charge 16 rupees again as the 15 rupees tax on the selling price. As a result of that, so remove all of the cascading effect. This is one advantage so far, the very, very important advantage so far the input tax credit mechanism in that. Secondly, if we are going to talk about the GST, coming on to the implementation, ease of doing a business, and then compliances with the business people drastically reduce. Everything is been digitalized mechanism. We can talk about Make in India slogan. The people started using all those things for the advantage of Make in India. So the business people has made to do a business without the interference of the department people so far as the tax administration is concerned. So multiple barriers. I tell you earlier, there were multiple barriers across the country. There was lot of restrictions on the movement of goods from one state to another, one union territory to others. By the introduction of GST, it is possible to remove these tax barriers among the across the country between the states. So what will happen? Once the barriers has been removed, controls have been removed, multi-point checks have been removed. Earlier, in our own state, we had about 400 to 500 checkposts. All those things were removed now. There is no question of any checkpost at all. It will move. But simultaneously, I will tell you, it does not mean that all are going to be relaxed. No. In GST, there are strict laws for the purpose. People who are in supply chain to comply with that take the advantage. If the people try to avoid all these compliances, automatically it will result in an evasion. They will face the consequences. One point I want to tell you, in an indirect tax GST like that, any offense or a violation, it results in a criminal offense, people will be behind the bars. So this has made the GST implementation as possible. Advantage has been taken over across the country. So under these circumstances, I will go to other things where GST involves. When I talk about the national economy and all those things, so we always in our country we have to concentrate on the small scale sector, because the small scale sector contributes major part of to the GDP so far as the productivity is concerned. So what will happen? There is a authority called GST Council consisting of all the states and union territories, headed by the finance minister, administered by the finance secretary. As the GST Council has decided at the time of introduction of the GST to give some thrust to the small scale sector. As a result of that, in GST, there is a scheme called composition scheme has been introduced for the small traders. Just because GST is there does not mean that they have to comply. Lot of compliances has to be done. Periodical return, payment, record keeping, and all those things, it is still there in GST. One has to maintain transparency. One important in GST is the maintaining the transparency. Nobody will be trying to escape from the GST net. If a person tries to escape from the GST net, he will face lot of problems. So as a result of that, lot of people who are not paying the tax has brought into the tax net, and that too especially in the small sector, SME or MSME. To take care of this growth in the small scale sector, GST has a scheme called composition scheme. Composition scheme, as against the normal rate of tax payable, instead of that, they will pay a lesser tax. For example, you have a normal rate of tax starting from 5%, 12, 18, 28. So these people, small trading people, instead of paying the higher rate of tax, which will be difficult so far from the point of cash flow is concerned, they will be asked to pay a lesser tax as against the normal tax. Those people can take the advantage. All people cannot take this composition scheme. There is a turnover limit fixed under GST. Presently, the turnover limit fixed in GST is 1.5 crores for the composition scheme. All the dealers who have a turnover of less than 1.5 crores in all parts of the country, in northeastern state it is 75 lakhs. They will pay lesser tax, only small tax they will pay without availing the input tax credit system or the benefit. So for example, if we take a service sector, I will come to service sector. Before introduction of the GST, there was no tax by the state government on services. Then this is the GST, goods and service tax. So what will happen? One of the important advantages is that the state government also is taking the advantage of levying the tax on services also. When we talk about the economy or the industry or the commerce, whatever trade and all those things, without a service, business cannot be done also. Earlier in the year 1985, there was a tax called service tax by the central government only. There was no service tax on services by the state government. One of the important purpose of GST is to charge GST on services also. As a result of that, the tax, that is the service tax, will also go to the state government also. Then there are other things. One thing is MSME. Then when you go to the exemptions of GST, it is not necessary that all the people will pay tax. There is a basic requirement for all the people in various sectors. For example, you take exemptions, start from, because I am an educationist, I will talk about the education systems in the country. It is required to be given at a cheaper rate education system. So automatically, there is no GST tax impact on the educational facilities at all, exemption. This is a basic requirement. Whatever, when we are talking about economy, we have to talk about four things. One is an education, then development of the infrastructure, road, hospitalization, health services, and the other one requirement is the food. Wood is a essential, and other one important is the health sector. There are a lot of exemptions on the health sector, which is required for the existence of a human being. So as a result of that, I'll tell you in GST law, there are 81 entries in CGST Act 2017 with regard to exemptions. There is no tax on basic essentials of the human being at all. There is no tax at all. If a human being wants to enjoy more and more luxury, let him pay the tax. If he wants luxury, tax has to be paid. If he wants to live without any luxury for a basic living, there's no question of payment of any tax is concerned. Out of the 81 entries, exempt 10, which will benefit the society, benefit the government, and benefit the other sector also, because this is very, very impact on the economy in the country, providing a basic requirement for the human being. So these are all the areas where there will be development, where there will be a growth, where there will be a benefits to various sectors. These are all the things. Then when coming to the GST concept itself, I already told you, one I have discussed input tax credit mechanism. Tax is going to be levied where the goods are consumed. I have already told you, GST is a consumption-based destination tax. If any place where the goods are going to be consumed, that tax will go to that state. This is known as the consumption tax. If a goods are supplied from one state in our country and it is supplied to another state where the person going to receive the goods and use it, that person, because he has to go and consume the goods, he will pay the tax. That when it is paid by the tax, that tax will also go to the state government. So as a result of that, what will happen? 28 states and 8 union territories, they will try to increase the facilities for consumption of more and more goods and services. The government will establish for various service sectors. They will provide infrastructure for the various service sectors so that people will start more and more business in the service sector, because the state government will also get part of the GST. Exactly in our country, when I come to the type of GST, we have a dual system of taxation. Dual system means because of the federal structure in our country, dual tax system. There is one, the central tax and the state tax. And because of the federal structure, there will be movement of goods from one state to another. As a result of that, there is a dual tax. One is a central tax, other one is the state tax. So as a result of that, there are 3 taxes. Integrated GST, it is called as IGST. The other one is the split into 2, central and state, between the sharing of the revenues concerned. That is known as the central GST and the state GST. If I talk about the GST rate at 12%, if it is an integrated tax, it is 12%, because first of all, it goes to the central government. Later on, depending upon the place of consumption of the goods, central government automatically transfer funds to that state government where the goods are consumed. This is over the inter-movement, that is interstate movement of goods from one state to another. If the goods are not going to move, it will be only within the state. There is another dual system, CGST, STST. Even CGST, STST also, the total GST is split into 2, CGST and STST. One part will go to the central government, other part will go to the state government. Like that, instead of SGST, we have a UTGST. So like that, we have laws. What are the laws in GST? CGST is a basic act which gives lot of provisions, basic provisions for definitions, levy, compliances, forms, and all those things will be there. In addition to that, we have a state GST and union territory GST. In addition to that, for all these things, we have a rules also. Whenever we talk about the taxation, it will have 2 things. Please keep it in mind. One is an act and other one is the rules. The act gives a basic provisions for levy, collection, etc. The rules for collection, because once a tax is levied, it has to be collected by the government. So this collection is also important so far as the cost of benefit is concerned. Cost benefit. What is the cost of collection? If a tax is levied is 100 rupees, for collecting that 100 rupees, if the government sent more than that, it is not a cost benefit analysis so far as the GST is concerned. The collection cost should be drastically reduced. Because of that, lot of the system has been streamlined. Self-assessment system has been introduced in GST so that the people will comply more and more easily. They will come forward for self-compliances without any hindrance. Because I tell you, GST, which is have a lot of no interference in the earlier period because of the various taxes by the departments. So now I tell you, under GST, there will be minimum interference from the bureaucrat, that is the government exchequer. This is a sort of a cell system. For example, I'll tell you, in an MSME sector, there is no absolute interference from the government at all so far as the tax is concerned. So here, the composition scheme is allowed to manufacture. For example, in a manufacturer sector, where the turnover is less than 1.5 crores, the tax payable is only 1%, as against the normal rate of 12%, 18%. In a service sector, the normal rate is 18%. In a composition and all those things, there will be a lesser rate. For example, in a composition scheme for the service sector, as against the normal rate of 18% GST, in the service sector, where there is a composition scheme for the people who are having a small business of 50 lakhs and lower, they will pay only 5% GST. So this is a very important impact provided in the GST law for various sectors. Another important thing I want to tell you, I talk about the national market, competitive prices. If I talk about now ultimately economic development or impact of economy, the GST, all these things will have an impact not only in India, even on our imports and exports. Whenever we have an international trade, when we export, in GST there is the two things. One is the taxable territory and the non-taxable territory. Whenever there is a non-taxable territory, GST impact will be zero only. When we export the goods, the percent of the GST will come to zero. In addition to that, what is the advantage for the exporter? So here, whenever the input tax credit is going to be availed, only when there is an output tax. If the output tax is there, input tax credit allowed. If the output tax is not there, question of input tax credit does not arise. This is the basic principle of input tax credit. But this is not there in respect of the export of goods. Even though the export of goods are charged with a 0%, the person who has the inputs on which he pays the tax, he is eligible to take the input tax credit. So what will happen? Even if he is not paying any IGST in the exports, still he is eligible to take the input tax credit on all the inputs which has been tax has been paid on the purchase of raw materials. What will happen to all these input tax credit in the hands of the people who are having lot of exports also? Most of the people, they will develop the exports. So it will also have an advantage of inflow of foreign exchange to the country. You know, foreign exchange resources are very, very important. So under these circumstances, so the exporters will get a lot of advantage so far as the exports are concerned. All these input tax got accumulated in their account. One day, he can ask the government to pay back all those things. So it will have an important refund of GST or the input tax credit. Tax paid on inputs will be refunded to the exporters. Now what will happen? Automatically gets transferred to the accounts of the exporters. So you can imagine what are all the advantages are there. Of course, I don't say that there are disadvantages, because when it comes to the disadvantages, from the point of the functioning, monitoring and all those things, a strict compliance is required to be followed. Whenever there is an advantage, automatically there is a strict compliance also. One has to comply with that, all those things. So these are all the things that is the advantage so far as the GST is concerned. So under these circumstances, I think I will sum up what are the benefits to the three sectors and the national economy so far as the GST is concerned. So one is that from the government, I've already told you, increasing the tax base. When a tax base increases, automatically revenue to the government increases. I have already discussed about the revenue to the government. And then second one, in the supply chain, B2B transactions, all the people, they will be able to establish more and more businesses so that they will derive more profitability because of the increased demand. And ultimately, can it come to the consumer? It is the destination tax. Consumer, one advantage is they are able to get goods at a reduced rate across the country. Not only that, whatever the money they will left with because of the reduced prices, they will be able to utilize for other requirements As a result of that, the standard of a person is also going to be increased. When we talk about the economy and all those things, we have to talk about the standard of living of a common people. So, development of the people is the development of the country. Development of the citizens is the development of the country. Economic development on the hands of the people is also results in increased development for the country. GDP, what we have not seen in the year 70 years, we are able to at least see a horizon, small horizon from the past 3 years. I already told you it is only just 3 years of the implementation of the GST. We will derive the lot of benefits in the days to come. So only thing we should have a patience. We have waited so many years in the history without introduction of all these developments. Then other things are in the country is concerned. We have done. We will derive the benefit on par with the other countries. So what will happen? We are getting ourselves internationalized. We are able to establish a market in the whole world, not only in India. When we manufacture, we'll have to surpass all these barriers, go to the international market at a reduced economically reduced prices to see that the economy increases, GDP increases, standard of living. After all, what is the concept of a human being? A human being, day by day, he has to have a growth. If the growth is not there, he gets stagnated. It applies to a human being, it applies to a country. So this is the impact of GST. At last, I want to tell you, if the GST has not been introduced at least 3 years back, the country's position should have been still worst. So there is a definitely advantage is there by the GST. There are some small disadvantages there to overcome that disadvantages, compliances. Some people who are having using that is illegally black money, I'll tell you, it is a definitely disadvantageous for those people because they have to maintain perfect records, perfect transactions. One of the important is the transparency. People having lot of black money, it is a disadvantage for them only. So we are not bothered about that. So all the people, business people, will come to the mainstream, contributing the national exchequer by of increased revenue to the government, not only contributing to the society. So ultimately, GST, which is across the world, starting from the history which I told you and all those things, we are going to derive 130 crores people will have the advantage, unlike in an income tax. In an income tax, the direct tax, only about 6 to 7, 8 crores people are paying for 130 crores. GST is not like that. It is an indirect tax. It is to be paid by all the 130 crores. So as a result of that, there will be a lot of development in the national economy. So this is my summing up so far as the impact on the national economy, what is the purpose, how it has come and all those things. I hope with all these things, you will appreciate that GST definitely will contribute to the national economy for the development of the country. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Question. Does educational institution comes under MSME?
Educational institutions comes under the exempted category. See, it is not MSME because it is a service sector. Educational institutions comes under the service sector. It is not comes under MSME. There is no tax at all in the education system at all so far as the GST is concerned. Only related service with reference to education service will have a tax only. For example, if the educational institutions not paying taxes and all those things, if they are able to have established another commercial aspects in an education system, probably they have to pay the tax. Commercial aspect, for example, they have a training centers or residential accommodation. In all this, GST impact will be there. To give a basic education, educational institution will be a national level. There is an exemption category. It is not relating to MSME. MSME is only relating to the business category in respect of the supply of goods, in respect of the supply of services only. There are some small education institutions in the small sector. Major educational institution will not come under the GST purview at all. The question of whether it is an MSc or a large scale industry, that question does not arise. There are some questions are coming.
Register. Does college need to register for GST?
College is required to get a register because in addition to the education system, they will have all other services to be provided by the college. For example, let us assume that they are going to have some other courses other than the government approved courses. So they are required to impart some other courses to the development of the student category. So what will happen? In order to give training in all other area, tax is applicable. Only I tell you when it comes to the basic education, which is approved by the recognized by the Indian law, is only exempted category. In all other cases, if people want to do a foreign course and all those things, they have to pay tax. For example, we have a lot of professional courses which is imparted by various other countries, institutions. So they have to pay the tax at all. For example, I will talk about we have a professional course. So chartered accountant, cost accountants, companies, they have to pay tax on GST. There is no question of exemption because even though it is recognized by the government law, but these are all professional courses. If a college or any institution has this type of educational institutions, for example, computer training is to be given to the students. They will establish an institution. Automatically, no question of anything, they have to get registered also. But of course, whenever there is some services are involved, there is a basic exemption in the category of services only to the extent of 50 lakhs in a year. If it is a 50 lakhs less than that, there is a service tax only 5%. Another important thing I will tell you, in all the there is a threshold limit in GST. Threshold limit is now for the goods is 40 lakhs, so for the services is 20. As a result of that, people have some small activity even in a college or education institution. If there is a less than a year, they need not get registered. If it exceeds that, they will have to take the advantage of registration only. Okay, when there is a registration, there is an advantage of other things. What is the advantage? A registered person can take the input tax credit, use it for the payment of output tax. Tax element or tax impact will be very, very less. Some more questions, one or question. Health insurance. One question was there whether GST is there. There are some basic requirement of insurance. Earlier, when an exemption was issued by the government of India, there was an exemption. Now, all the people are required to have a health insurance. So it is only prospective. I will tell you, whenever the GST comes, it is an impact on the services provided. So health insurance comes under the services. So there is no exemption. All the type of health insurance comes under the purview of GST. A GST rate of 18% will be there. In the name of health insurance, one more point I'll tell you, cosmetic health services, lot of people. So on all those things, they will take advantage. So in order to overcome that, health insurance is not exempted, GST is payable, and the premium paid for all the type of health insurance. So GST has to be levied on all those things. This is the question. Okay. I think these are one or two questions people have asked for me, so I have replied that. I think I'll end up my discussion on GST. I thank once again all my college authorities for having given me this opportunity to share my thoughts. I hope it has benefited you. Some thought or insight you can put it on the GST so far as the advantages is concerned. All my friends in the professional or whatever it is there, you can talk about it and all those things. Once again, thank you very much.
I am Sushmita I, Assistant Professor of APS College of Commerce. At an outset, I would like to thank the organization for giving me an opportunity to propose vote of thanks. I thank today's resource person, CMA Venkanayas, for giving a wonderful session and answering all the questions. And we have got a lot of response from the participants also. And from the bottom of my heart, I would like to thank you, sir. Thank you very much for being a part of this. Moving on, I would like to thank the management of APS Educational Trust Principal Dr. D.M. Mukunnayak, Vice Principal Dr. D.C. Shivanna, and our coordinator Dr. B.S. Sudha, and the coordinators of the webinar committee, Assistant Professor Shankar K, Assistant Professor Sri Lakshmi V. Kittur, Assistant Professor Roma TV, and Assistant Professor Rajamuthu D. I thank all the teaching and non-teaching staff for providing an excellent service for organizing organizing the webinar. Last but not the least, I like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the participants. Dear participants, please find the feedback form in the description form box. If you close the live chat, you can find the description box, and if you click that, you will get. Thank you.
I think ಮರೆದೇ ಇರಲಿ ಅನ್ಬಿಟ್ಟು ಒಂದಷ್ಟು ಹಾಕೊಂಡೆ.
ಆಯ್ತು.